Hello there, this is Good Morning Transfers. This is the group chat you want to be in. Plenty coming up this morning for you.
Coming up, we'll be putting one player in the spotlight who looks like he's heading to the Premier League.
James Maddison is attracting interest from Manchester United. Can Leicester keep hold of their key player?
We've got news of a deal at West Ham edging closer, one that should be complete later today.
They talk too much and it does my head in. Those are the words of the Arsenal captain. We bring you the latest on Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, but don't forget this is your show and here's how you can get involved.
A reminder, you can download the latest Transfer Talk podcast right now. It's available on iTunes, Spreaker and the Sky Sports website. Right, let's get into it. Inter Milan's chief executive has confirmed they are interested in the Tottenham midfielder Christian Eriksen. Alice, tell us more. What's he had to say?
OK, firstly, key to this is that no negotiations have actually started between the parties, but the chief executive, Giuseppe Maratta, he spoke to Sky in Italy last night. This is what he had to say. He said, often important players are approached to us. Eriksen is an excellent player whose contract expires in June, as we all know, and we've had no contact with Tottenham. I still believe there are many teams interested in him, and we've not started any kind of negotiations, which they are obviously key to point out. I simply say that he's an important and an interesting player. We're looking for a midfielder and an outsider. We're having several contacts with companies and agents to try to improve the group. We've not yet reached a conclusion because we want to do everything very calmly to keep the goal bar always high. Now, obviously, Jose Mourinho said on Friday that he's unsure whether Eriksen will leave the club. We know how much he wants him to stay, but yeah, that's what we had last night.
I mean, there was always going to be speculation over Christian Eriksen's future, given the fact that his contract is up at the end of the season. Inter Milan are the first to really break ranks and talk about Christian Eriksen across Europe, aren't they?
Yeah, but he's not really said too much, though, Dave. I'm not trying to kill the story there. He's made it pretty clear that no contact has been made yet, but that could be done for a range of reasons. Now, Sky in Italy, in fact, this morning are reporting that not Christian Eriksen, but Arturo Vidal remains their top target. It would appear, though, sort of reading between the lines, that they're probably lining up Eriksen as a possibility if they fail in their pursuit of the Chilean. They might even be speaking about Eriksen last night in the media over there in Italy to try and get Barcelona moving on the Vidal deal. But Sky Italy say the deal for Vidal isn't simple. He's got a lot of games to play for Barcelona coming up. They say his relationship with the head coach Ernesto Valder isn't great, and they feel that with patience that deal could go through. They're not sure though, so it looks as though Eriksen is maybe one of a few that they're juggling right now. But as I say, no contact made yet. So yeah, not trying to kill the story, but it appears maybe that one is in its early days. That one could go all the way.
And Mark, welcome to the show. It's your first one in the studio.
Happy New Year, mate.
It's great to be back in. Yeah, last week I was out on the golf course. Today I'm doing some real work.
Did you actually get around in with Harry Redknapp last week?
Oh, that'd be telling. He's a great golfer, though, Harry.
Christian Eriksen then at Tottenham. It's not going to be Inter Milan, just Inter Milan that are interested in him. And of course, there's still the possibility that he might end up signing a new contract at Tottenham.
And of course, you have to look at the fact that they got to the Champions League final last year. They've got a brand new manager, a serial winner in Jose Mourinho. You've just seen some of his teammates sign long-term deals. I'm sure there's a part of Christian Eriksen that sat there thinking, do I want to stay in North London? Do I want to be a part of this project? Because Pochettino clearly took the club forward. Can Jose Mourinho take it to that next level? And I think there'll be a question mark in Christian's mind as to whether staying at Tottenham could be a really viable option, which perhaps 6 months ago it wasn't.
I think Spurs will also understand that with Christian Eriksen's contract situation, that this was inevitable. With 6 months left on this deal, those big European clubs were going to be fishing around. There was always going to be conversation and rumours and speculation around his name because of the talent of the player. So I don't think it's anything that would surprise Spurs. But I think the key word to remember is, as Alice quoted earlier, is no negotiations have started as of yet. So everything's still up in arms, and Christian Eriksen still holds all of the cards at this moment in time. And Spurs, as you say, would still probably want to renew that contract of probably one of the best players in their team.
He's a quality player. He's a great midfielder. He has so much ability, and there'll be so many people that are monitoring the situation and just waiting to make their move. And as we hear, Inter Milan have made the first one, but I think there'll be a whole host of clubs that join them.
Do you not feel as though Eriksen himself has got his sights set higher than Inter Milan, with all due respect to them?
I think he had his sights set on Real Madrid. I think that was his dream move, that was the golden ticket, that was what he wanted. But it didn't quite happen for him over the course of the summer. So now he's just playing sort of the patient game, just waiting to see how things develop. But at the end of the day, the key thing for Christian Eriksen is just keep playing good football.
Keith actually makes such a good point there, because where would Inter Milan be in comparison to Spurs? Like, he's probably wants to make that next move at 27, 28 to turn around and say, look, this is the time when I need to win trophies to elevate my career to the next level. In comparison to Spurs, where would Inter Milan kind of rank as a move within his own mind? So that question of whether or not he would stay in North London, if Inter Milan are the front runners, it does pose a proposal that maybe he might even consider staying at Spurs.
And we know that Levy's obviously said that they wouldn't be scared of losing him to a Premier League rival. So obviously we know Manchester United could be interested. There has been interest in the past. But as you say, JD, would that be a step up either? Would Inter Milan be a step up? Is he onto a good thing at Spurs at the minute with the new stadium, with Jose Mourinho? Jose Mourinho managed to get Toby Alderweireld to sign a new contract, and I'm sure he'll take a little bit of credit for that. He'll be hoping that Eriksen will follow suit. But they've got a good relationship, it sounds like.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting, that interview that Daniel Levy gave. I think it was just before Christmas, where he said, we're not scared to do business with our rivals, which maybe would then open the door to him moving in this coming January window, potentially. Remember, you can get in touch with us. Use the hashtag #TransferTalk at Sky Sports News on Twitter. A couple of you are already getting in touch as well. Joseph, Tottenham need a few transfers this January, as I think Eriksen might be going, so plenty of you having your say. You can keep those tweets coming in at Sky Sports News. Now, next this morning, we're going to talk about Leicester City and their midfielder, James Maddison. They're another player, really, who's had a lot of speculation around his future over the last few weeks, particularly the starts of the season that he's had. There is a clear message, though, from Brendan Rodgers that he is not for sale. Remember, we are hearing from the Leicester manager later today here on Sky Sports News. We told you yesterday that he's of interest to Manchester United, having impressed this season. Keith, what's the Manchester United view on this, do you think?
Yeah, well, we heard from James Cooper, our Manchester United correspondent, yesterday, didn't we? And told us, as we all know, how many times he's been watched by Manchester United this season, and the fact that he's obviously got Leicester's season off to an absolute flyer, sitting second, sitting pretty second in the Premier League. Now, as James told us yesterday, James Cooper, not James Maddison.
Just clarify.
He ticks a number of boxes for the United scouts. He's 23 years old, he's English, goal-scoring creative midfielder, the sort of player they're looking for. And as we've seen this season in many occasions, he has the ability to control the match from the middle of the pitch. And of course, take into account Pogba, obviously with this short-term injury, McTominay out for a number of months. They are looking to bring in midfielders and players who could bolster that. And I think, though, they have been stung with what happened with Erling Haaland a few weeks ago, so they are keen on him. But you have to say, looking at it, you would think that is probably too big a deal for them to do, even whether Leicester want to work with them or not, to do this January.
Well, we've got James Maddison's record to show you at Leicester City. So far, this is his record during his Leicester career: 61 games, 16 goals, 10 assists. I mean, double figures for goals and assists. Chances created there, 156. Shots, 144. I mean, Mark, we'll come to you for the Leicester angle on this, because, I mean, they'll be desperate to hold onto it. And I'm sure Brendan Rodgers might get a little bit frustrated if he's continued to be asked about one of his prize assets.
I think an important thing to point out that you don't see in those graphics there is that he runs games, he dictates the tempo, he plays like, he controls a Leicester City midfield, and he's been so influential in the Premier League this season. He is the type of player that every single manager in the Premier League would want. And like you rightly say there, Leicester City have been very adamant that he's not for sale, and they've always been that way with all of their big stars. They sell them when they're ready to sell them for the price that they want to get. At the moment, it's very apparent that Leicester City do not want to sell James Maddison, and I don't think they actually will sell him.
But this is huge credit to Leicester, isn't it? I mean, they just keep churning out these stars. England internationals, you look at the likes of, obviously, James Maddison, Ben Chilwell, just to name a couple of them. They're so young as well, and unfortunately for Leicester fans, James Maddison totally fits the mould of what Manchester United are going for at the minute. He's young, he's got the drive, he's got the talent. They're obviously lacking a bit of creativity in midfield. Has Paul Pogba got the passion? You really can't argue that James Maddison hasn't got the passion, because he shows that week in, week out. He showed it at Norwich, he showed it at Coventry. He's been linked with big clubs for such a long time, but he doesn't let it get to him. And I think, yeah, he's such a star, isn't he?
The thing is, if you're James Maddison as well at the moment, you're looking at it and going, Manchester United or Leicester City, who's going to win titles? Who's going to win silverware? Right now,
yeah,
It's Leicester City.
Yeah, but it's not just that though. It's not just that, because we had the same conversation last summer when we was talking about Harry Maguire. We were sitting there saying, this Leicester squad right here that's developing with so much young talent around them, with so much potential going forward, with a great manager, why would you leave Leicester to go to Manchester United, who's clearly rebuilding? But it's not that appeal. We understand that there's more that goes into it, historical context and all the rest of it. But I just want to actually look at Maddison. The point you just made a second ago, Maddison is actually a unique story that we actually really need to start considering in this country a little bit more. Because that development, I remember watching him, I actually went to Coventry University, so I remember going to watch him play for Coventry at 18, and he was head and shoulders above everybody else at League One at that stage. And my housemate at that point projected it and told me straight he's going to go and play for England. And I didn't see it, but the development in terms of his career, every step that he's made from Norwich to then go on to Leicester, you've seen his progression, you've seen his ability, you've seen his development. And that's credit to him, but that's also credit to the coaching staff that he's been around. You have to ask yourself, if you move to Manchester United, are you going to get that same development? Are you going to get that same opportunity? And then he has to question his own career. So we've seen how some moves haven't worked out, we've seen how some moves have worked out. It's up to the individual at that point whether he turns on and says, can I make it at so-called bigger club? But the setup that he has at Leicester right now is fantastic.
He's onto a good thing there, definitely.
You have to think as well, when Brendan Rodgers was lured to Leicester City, he must have been assured that the likes of Maddison would stay. He's obviously lost Harry Maguire already. Can they afford to lose another one in the space of, 6 months or less than a year? Surely not.
Yeah, and he's actually, just to pick up on your point about the development of the player, he's spoken before in an interview saying that the fact that he played 50 or 60 games by the age of 20 gave him such a great leap forward in terms of his development as a player, which, will be really good for players, youngsters watching at home.
They need to
today.
play games. They need to play games. Competitive, playing in those sort of leagues and understanding you're playing against grown men that are fighting because they need to pay their mortgage. Yeah. It's a completely different level of development to playing in youth football.
It's credit to the EFL. Yeah. Some absolutely outstanding players right through the 72 EFL clubs, and they are producing and working with some of the great prospects that are then going up and playing in the Premier League, and that's what James Maddison is, and Jamie Vardy's done it, and you love those stories. I think everyone really, really admires a player that started at the bottom and worked his way right through to the top, and he's virtually at the top now. Could he play in Manchester United's team now? Absolutely. 100%. Could he play it in 12 months, 18 months? Of course, but it's just about getting that move right, and right now I think Leicester is the best place for him.
Well, hashtag transfer talk is the way you can get in touch at Sky Sports News as well. Marcus has said, I hope Maddison doesn't go to United, a great player who will only get better. Neil, I hope United bid for Maddison in this window to at least test the water. Finner said United need at least 2 midfielders in this window, a creative one and a box-to-box one. This is the area they are struggling in, especially creating chances. He says Maddison and Eriksson should be top of the list. And Paul has got in touch as well. Slightly Maddison related, but in the midfield, he says, get Paul Pogba off the books. He clearly doesn't want to be at our club. Cash in, try and build around some of the young talent we already have. So that one there from Paul, the United fan. Hashtag transfer talk is the way you get in touch. Time now for State of Play with Alice.
Yeah, let's bring you up to date this morning. So Manchester United, Arsenal and Chelsea are all chasing the Lille midfielder Boubakary Soumaré, who's likely to be sold this month. Arsenal captain Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang has rejected rumours he might leave the Emirates by telling the club he is committed to staying. Sheffield United's record goalscorer Billy Sharp will be allowed to leave this month, that's if he wishes. Middlesbrough and Nottingham Forest have both inquired as to whether he would be available this month. Elsewhere, Middlesbrough goalkeeper Darren Randolph's £4 million move to West Ham has been agreed. We understand a medical is taking place today. And Liverpool, Chelsea and Tottenham are among the clubs monitoring the Brighton defender Ben White during his current loan at Leeds.
Thank you, Alice. Still to come on Good Morning Transfers, we have reached our next club on Who Needs What. Next up, it is Crystal Palace. Welcome along, this is Good Morning Transfers. Before we talk about Palace, we have some news reaching us from Sunderland. Keith Downey's across this for us. Keith, what can you tell us?
I'm here today. The Sunderland owner, Stuart Donald, we've known for a little while now, we've known for a long time really that he's been trying to sell the club. He's pretty much been trying to sell the club since he arrived 18 months ago, but a collection of supporters groups got together a couple of weeks ago due to results being poor, performances being poor. They're not happy with the new manager, Phil Parkinson, and called for him to sell up. He actually spoke on a local radio show just last week, Stuart Donald, where he confirmed that he will look now to sell the football club because these well-known supporters groups have asked him to go. Well, the club have actually issued a statement in the last sort of 10 minutes where they have confirmed this, and they say that basically he has, or the club have no other option but to try and find a new buyer because the supporters have turned. Just looking at the wording of it, it sounds like they're disappointed that the supporters groups have maybe jumped early. Interestingly, since the statement came out from the group of supporters clubs, they've actually gone 3 matches unbeaten and are now close to the playoff places and look like they're getting their act together while the January transfer window is open. Stuart Donald has said, though, despite the fact that he is going to sell the club, that he will commit funds for the January transfer window, so do expect Sunderland to do some business. But it does seem strange that he is going to do that when he says the club is now for sale. He reckons that he will sell or will find a buyer within 1 to 2 months. But just looking at the tone of this from Sunderland, the first time they've actually said something on the record as a club, it sounds like they're a little bit disappointed that the supporters groups have jumped when they have. So we could find the long-running saga of Sunderland. We could find new owners just less than 2 years after Stuart Donald bought the club from Ellis Short when he left in the summer when they went down to League One.
But just to reiterate, plans in place for this January window, because I know Sunderland fans at home will be watching.
That's what he's saying. He is saying that they have put some funds aside, and remember they actually got a £10 million loan just a couple of months ago from the American consortium. Now, Stuart Donald said just last week that he's not touched that £10 million. I'm not for a second saying that that £10 million is going to be committed to buying players in League One. I think they will be looking at loans and sort of bargain basement signings, should we say, players that they think they can get them out of League One. But he has said there will be money to spend in January, despite the fact that the club now is officially up for sale, just like, as they say, just like the supporters want.
OK, Keith, thank you very much. Let's go to Alice at the Skypad.
Thank you, Dave. Now, we've been making our way through each Premier League team, telling you what each side is looking for this January. Next up in the alphabet is Crystal Palace. Now, we understand they're prioritising 3 main positions. Those are right back, left back and up front. Now, Palace obviously lost Aaron Wan-Bissaka to Manchester United. That was back in the summer, and they're yet to replace him. Injuries to Jeffrey Schlupp and Patrick van Arnholt have left them short at left back. And up front, Christian Benteke has struggled for form, hasn't he, this season? They can't solely rely on Jordan Ayew for the goals, but could Michy Batshuayi fill that void? Palace are also being linked with Cenk Tosun, who they tried to sign in 2018. That was before he joined Everton. And finally, will they be able to keep hold of Wilfried Zaha? We know how much manager Roy Hodgson wants him to stay, but he may face an uphill battle to keep him. His desire to win major honours, that's now prompted his decision to hire the super agent Pinu Zahavi. So plenty for Hodgson to be pondering there then, guys.
There is indeed, Alice. Thank you very much. And I mean, Alice mentioned there the striker problems for Roy Hodgson. It seems to be a reoccurring theme, strikers at Crystal Palace, Keith, doesn't it?
Yeah, it seems like they've been playing without a recognised centre-forward for, a couple of seasons now. We'll obviously all witness the toils of Christian Benteke. It looks as though it's just not going to work out for him at Crystal Palace, and he will be moved on. We've actually seen Jordan Ayew come in and do well this season, I think. Scored 5 goals. And remember, Palace have actually made a decent start to the season, sitting there in the top half. So he's actually filled in quite well. We've seen Wilfried Zaha sometimes come in and play through the middle. But without doubt, they need a new centre-forward, and that is the noises coming out of the club. We mentioned Cenk Tosun. Clearly, not Carlo Ancelotti isn't a fan of him. I think Carlo Ancelotti actually watched him from the stand. The day he took over from Everton in the 0-0 draw with Arsenal, he actually watched him in the stand while Duncan Ferguson took the team. Ferguson brought him on in the 10th minute and then subbed him off again after the 80th minute. Ancelotti watched that. He hasn't featured since at all. So that would indicate he's going to be on his move. And you could see him with, you know, the likes of Zaha and Jeffrey Schlupp and Andros Townsend. You could actually see him, the kind of striker he is, fitting in, I think, to the way they play football. Yeah,
we've got some stats for Cenk Tosun to show you. In his 51 games played at Everton, this is his record: 10 goals, 6 assists, conversion rate of 13%. But JD, you look at Roy Hodgson, and he would probably, well, I'm sure he will, he's had such a long career, he would enjoy the task of reigniting a striker like Cenk Tosun, who obviously came over thinking that the Premier League would be a success for him, and you know, Everton fans might say that it's not particularly worked out for him. So you would think that Roy Hodgson would enjoy the task of trying to get the best out of him.
I think what Roy Hodgson would look at first of all is obviously Cenk Tosun came with a £27 million price tag, so he's not obviously worth that much value in terms of that value in the market at this moment in time. So you're going to get a striker who has proven across Europe that he has got some quality and at a discounted price. So, I mean, the question that Downey actually created, which was fantastic, was the fact that they actually haven't filled that void. I know Keith's upset because I called him Downey on set. but they actually haven't filled that number 9 void that's been left there for such a while. And you see away from home, they usually maybe use Zaha in that position, maybe in the false 9. Sometimes Andros Townsend, they alternate. And as you say, Jordan Ayew has played well in that position this year, but they need a definitive number 9. Connor Wickham's tried but can't keep fit for a regular period of time. We spoke about Christian Benteke's form up and down, who struggled over the last 2 seasons. So at this point, he would be obviously open to that option of Cenk Tosun, but at the same time, yeah, he wants probably someone with a little bit more confidence coming into his team.
OK, remember you can get in touch, use the hashtag #TransferTalk. Let's bring you up to date now on some of the stories across the EFL and Scottish Premiership.
So we'll start with Celtic and Scott Sinclair. Remember him, he missed training in Dubai yesterday and is expected to fly to the UK today ahead of a potential move to Preston.
Oldham Athletic have completed the signing of Salford City centre-back Carl Biaggiani, who moves to Boundary Park on loan until the end of the season.
And Bournemouth have decided to recall midfielder Kyle Taylor from his loan spell at Forest Green Rovers.
And finally, back to North London. Tottenham's George Marsh has extended his loan deal at Leyton Orient until the end of the season.
And one line just reaching us from the Championship in the last few moments. This is a player who we were expecting to go out on loan during this January window. Swansea City are close to a deal to take the Liverpool striker Ryan Brewster on loan until the end of the season. It will be up to the player to make the final decision. So Swansea close to that deal for Brewster. It's up to the player to make that final decision. Keep using that hashtag #TransferTalk. Have your say. Next up, we'll be discussing the future of Wilfried Zaha. Is this the month he leaves Crystal Palace? Welcome back. This is Good Morning Transfers. The way to get in touch with the team is at Sky Sports News. Use the hashtag #TransferTalk. We have got some tweets to bring you. This from Gab Edward, or Ewood. Tottenham need a backup striker for Kane, especially now he's injured. Get Mitrovic from Fulham. Also get a right back, hopefully Max Aarons, and a defensive midfielder. They say get rid of some players too. Eriksson, Vertonghen, Dyer and Wanyama. Strong opinions there from another Tottenham fan. We've got Danny THFC. Thanks for getting in touch. Jose's top priority should be a defensive midfielder. Our back four needs protection, and then we can look at new fullbacks. That's all we need to solidify our defence. That was obviously, we were talking about Christian Eriksen at the top of the show. And one following on our chat from James Maddison as well. Carl says, why would Madison want to go? Manchester United might have history, but Leicester are creating history, he says. Great club with a great future and a world-class manager. Look at Maguire, gone to Manchester United, and fans slate him week in, week out. Leicester constantly being overlooked as a top 6 team. Why? That's from Carl there, who I assume is a Leicester fan. Let's talk about Arsenal. Their captain, Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang, has rejected rumours that he might leave the club by saying he is committed to staying. This is what he said last night in Arsenal's programme. He says, finally, I would also like to react to some of the rumours that are going around about me in the media. People like making up stories and they should focus on what's happening on the pitch. They talk too much and it does my head in. I am the Arsenal captain. I love this club. I'm committed to it and desperate to bring it back to the top where it belongs. JD, does that officially put to bed any transfer conjecture?
Oh,
over
a month is
Aubameyang?
a long time in football, isn't it? Things have kind of changed around so quickly in North London. You'd love to see your captain, your talisman, you're the face of the club, your top goal scorer, come out and say those sort of things, especially in this time where Arsenal's future is a little bit uncertain. You turn around and say that for your captain to be so definitive about his future is fantastic. So I do think it does put those transfer rumours to an end, especially because those are quotations directly coming out of his mouth. But it then couples up with exactly what Mikel Arteta was talking about when he comes into this club, saying he doesn't want cliques. He wants everybody to be together. He wants leadership kind of from within that is kind of exuberate outwards. And this sort of example is everything that Arsenal would want kind of going forward.
I'd be interested to know whether he voluntarily came up with the idea of putting those quotes in the programme, or whether he might have had some kind of steer that it would be a good thing to do. Obviously, we don't know the answer to that, but it seems like Mikel Arteta's arrival has helped definitely steady the ship. Obviously, Granit Xhaka, what happened with him not long before, him being stripped of the Arsenal captaincy, did leave the club in a sticky situation really, but it seems like it's a happier place now Arteta's there, and that's exactly what you want the fans to be hearing, isn't it?
Are you suggesting the words "does my head in" aren't those of Pierre Aubameyang?
You never know.
Sounds like the Arsenal fans. Surely the fans would prefer him to not just say it, but sign a new contract.
See, there's still that question mark, though, because of the structure and the way that Arsenal have historically run their contracts, especially because we sometimes blink and forget Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang is 30 years old. And so, in retrospect, 30 is young, but in footballing terms, you're probably past your peak. Now, I'm sitting there watching Aubameyang, as we are every single week, and he doesn't look like a player that's past his peak. No. He still has that sharp edge, he still has that goal-scoring threat. Still Arsenal's probably best player, most informed player this season. So you would want his long-term future to be solidified, but with only 18 months left on that contract, unfortunately, football clubs kind of look at players as the long-term value of everybody. And you have to say at 32, what is the value of Aubameyang as it is in comparison to it is at 30?
Maybe most Arsenal supporters would agree that Mikel Arteta was appointed as a long-term appointment. So does Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang fit into a long-term future for Arsenal Football Club?
Yeah, I personally believe he does, because I believe within any football structure you should have a mixture of experience and youth. And those young players that's in the squad, the Reece Nelsons that we watched yesterday, the Martinellis, they're all going to look up to Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang as the senior member in that team, as the player that's done it across the whole of Europe at the highest level in European competitions, and say, look, when times are rough, or when I'm having a dip in form, or when I need to work on my game, that's the player that I need to lean on in the training ground, have a word in the air. Those sort of things are just as important to the component of any football club as the running or the value of any player in that team.
I think in terms of short term, the good thing about Arsenal right now, or the positive thing for their supporters, is they all seem to be smiling again. And it's such a simple thing to say, but you saw them after the win against Manchester United the other week when Arteta came on and embraced all the players. You know, you saw the likes of Ozil and Xhaka, who have obviously, their faces have been tripping them for a long time now. It was really good to see, and I don't think Aubameyang will be his toughest challenge to try and sort of get them on side. And I know you're talking about long-term target, but I think right now Arteta will be looking just to try and turn things around until the end of the season, and then take it on in the summer and make the big decisions then.
Well, Matthew has got in touch. He says he's a big Arsenal fan, massive Arsenal fan, he describes himself as. We need two new experienced centre-backs who are young and determined to fight for the badge. We also need a backup left winger. That from Matthew Rose. Time for State of Play with Alice.
Yes, Manchester United, Arsenal and Chelsea are all chasing the lid midfielder Boukari Soumaré. Scott Sinclair is on the verge of a move to Preston from Celtic, bringing him back to England for the first time since he left Manchester City. Elsewhere, Swansea City are close to a deal to take the Liverpool striker Ryan Brewster. That will be on loan until the end of the season, and it will be up to Brewster to make the final decision. Sheffield United's record goal scorer Billy Sharp is allowed to leave the club this month if he wishes. Middlesbrough and Nottingham Forest have both inquired as to whether he'd be available this month. Liverpool, Chelsea and Tottenham are among the clubs monitoring Brighton defender Ben White. That's during his current loan at Leeds.
OK, let's bring you some news that's just reaching us here at Sky Sports News on Good Morning Transfers. Danny Drinkwater will return to training with Chelsea this morning after his loan spell with Burnley was cut short. Now, Drinkwater isn't currently part of Frank Lampard's plans. Both Chelsea and the player himself are keen to arrange another loan deal in the Premier League before the window closes. Now, we reported just at the tail end of last month, before the new year, that Aston Villa expressed an interest in Drinkwater, but it seems that potentially the season-ending injuries to Wesley and goalkeeper Tom Heaton mean that the striker position and the goalkeeper position are now their main focus, and that the need for a new midfielder has dropped down their priority list. So that's the latest on Danny Drinkwater, back in training with Chelsea this morning after his loan spell with Burnley was cut short. Let's talk about Wilfried Zaha. We mentioned him a little bit earlier. We've had it confirmed that he has switched agents in a deal that was agreed in the last couple of days. Mark, what more do we know?
It wouldn't be a transfer window without talking about Wilfried Zaha, would it? He seems to be on everyone's lips every time the windows come round. It's an interesting move, this one, and I think it reaffirms his desire to compete at the very highest level, compete in the Champions League, play European football and challenge for silverware. The agreement to team up with the renowned Israeli negotiator and part company with Will Salthouse, his former agent, was concluded in the last 72 hours, as you say, and that's a clear indication of his desire to potentially leave Selhurst Park. It seems unlikely that any move will happen in this window, but it almost sets things up perfectly for a move to happen in the summer. Zaha knows his future may lie outside of the Premier League, though, because there's only a small number of clubs that can actually afford his wages and, of course, the money that Crystal Palace want for him. We understand there was a bid last summer from Everton around £63 million, but it's our understanding that something in the region of 80 to 90 million is what Crystal Palace would be looking for. More recently, Chelsea have apparently rekindled their interest in the 27-year-old winger, and obviously now with their transfer ban having been lifted, it now gives them the opportunity to sign players. So it'll be an interesting one to monitor that switch potentially across London. But once again, Zaha in the headlines.
I spoke to people close to Wilf Zaha this morning because it was kind of, this is a personal decision. You kind of look at these sort of objectives and you always say that these are personal decisions that players make. And just the understanding that I have from speaking to Wilf previously, but also from the people that's close to him right now, is that he kind of has to look at himself at 27 years old and probably take his own career into his hands. As you say, he does have that ambition. Like, I can personally say, meeting him, he does have that personal ambition. You can see it in the way that he carries himself, what he talks about, and the things that he wants to achieve. Now he has to say to himself at 27, how many more big moves do I have in me? How many more chances am I going to have to compete at Europe's top competitions? And how far can I push myself and in my own career? So these sort of decisions, as you say, they might not impact this window, but maybe later on down the line, it's probably a player that's taking more control and more onus over his career.
I think also we can't forget he hasn't exactly had a standout season so far. He has scored a few goals, yes, but I think the longer the saga goes on, he has obviously got an agreement with Hodgson that while he's there, he will continue to give all he has, but he has been a bit up and down this season. So yes, we are quoting that he could be worth a lot of money if he were to move, but he needs to be finding the form for Crystal Palace fans if he does stay.
Yeah, I remember when the transfer window closed in the summer, he said, you know, my beef is not with Roy Hodgson, my beef is with the owner and the chairman.
That was well played, man. I like that, the way he said that.
that was his words. Darren's got in touch and said, surely even Zaha has had his days. Always talk of him leaving, but he always stays. There has to be a reason why no one actually goes ahead with a big money bid. Interesting point from Darren.
I mean, in retrospect, you understand that, but I don't really feel like when it comes to the ins and outs of the transfers, people can turn around and look at it from an outside, but there are so many more complications that go into it. Wage packets, sometimes it's the structure of the clubs that's selling as well. Can they afford to let a player go and that moment right there to find a suitable replacement? And Crystal Palace, to let a player like Wilf Zaha go, and we've seen the impact that he's had over the last 3 or 4 seasons, at that point would have been to use any superlatives, would have been basically verging himself into a real relegation battle. So I feel like at that moment right there, Crystal Palace didn't have the structure to turn around and say that we could let a player of Wilf's quality go.
Well,
now they've had a few windows,
didn't they, in the summer?
But that's probably defensively.
Yeah.
You've seen Roy Hodgson. Roy Hodgson is a defensive-minded manager, and you've seen it in the solid ambition that they've had throughout this season. So they haven't really ever had a problem defensively. It's always been going forward in the other side. Can they score goals? Can they create chances?
And just to highlight that point you make there, if Crystal Palace didn't have Wilfried Zaha over the last 2 or 3 seasons, are the chances that they would be now playing Championship football higher? Absolutely.
100%.
That's how important he is, and that's how good their business has been done to keep him. But like you say, how many times can you fight to keep a player that essentially sees his future elsewhere?
Yeah, 3 goals so far this season for Wilf Zaha, and it was 10 last season. So you'd think you'd have to go some to overtake his tally from last year, but certainly a significant period for Wilf Zaha, not only in the next couple of weeks before the end of this January window, but then also looking ahead to that summer transfer window. Don't forget to download the latest episode of the Transfer Talk podcast. It's available for you right now on iTunes and Spreaker. Next up on Good Morning Transfers, it is the Spotlight, plus the latest on Darren Randolph's potential move to West Ham. Welcome back to Good Morning Transfers. It is time for the Transfer Spotlight. Mark.
In the spotlight today, it's Gedson Fernandes. He hit the headlines at the start of the window and looked like being one of the first movers into the Premier League for January, but things have slowed down over the weekend. West Ham remains his preferred destination for the Benfica midfielder, who has made just 9 appearances this season. He reportedly has fallen out with the coach, but did play in their game over the weekend. He is currently in Lisbon with his representatives, and West Ham are continuing talks and looking to tie up a potential move. The deal on offer is an 18-month loan with an option to buy. He's a highly rated and has a great engine on him. He's very good technically and has the ability to play forward or help out defensively. Whoever gets him will be getting a real gem of a player. Also, Manchester United and Everton are among a number of clubs who have also been looking at the player. And finally, it's his 21st birthday in 2 days' time. Could he get the birthday present he wants and a dream move to the Premier League?
Things potentially starting to move in this January transfer window then, and news to bring you this morning. Inter Milan have contacted Chelsea about the possibility of signing striker Olivier Giroud. Now, that contact took place before Christmas, that's according to Sky in Italy. There have been no fresh negotiations since then, but the 33-year-old remains one of Inter's targets this month. A move to Inter Milan would obviously reunite Giroud with manager Antonio Conte, who was in charge of Chelsea when the French international moved to Stamford Bridge in January 2018. Giroud is going to be of interest to a number of clubs then, not only in the Premier League, but then, as we're hearing now, in Italy as well. Yeah,
I don't think it really comes as a surprise either, because earlier this week we obviously broke the news that that Chelsea had failed with a bid for the Lyon striker Moussa Dembele. If they go back in and want to get him, then obviously the likes of Michy Batshuayi and Olivier Giroud would probably be surplus to requirements. And on the first day of the show, we also mentioned about Aston Villa, how much they desperately need a striker. Obviously, if they didn't need a striker before Wesley got injured, they probably need 2 now. That horrible injury on New Year's Day in the win over Burnley. So Olivier Giroud has been linked with them as well, the likes of Crystal Palace, who we've talked about, obviously them needing a striker as well. So I think there's going to be a lot of interest around Olivier Giroud. Obviously Tammy Abraham is doing the business for Chelsea at the minute. Will Dembele come in and provide that competition? Giroud's not going to want to stay, is he?
It's not very often you get the opportunity to sign a World Cup winner.
Yeah, true.
That's what he is. He's won a lot of trophies, but most significantly, he's a World Cup winner.
It's looking more and more likely that your prediction on show 1, Alice,
well,
the original one,
hopefully,
not the second one.
Yeah, hopefully. I actually made another prediction as well, so I'm hoping I get a go at 2 of them.
That's in the box.
They're both in the box.
Yes. Tom White can't
no
see
peeping.
Olivier Giroud is obviously going to be of interest, as we mentioned there, to clubs abroad, but obviously in the Premier League. And one club who are looking for a striker, Keith, is Newcastle. Kieran's been on. Newcastle need to sign a proven goal scorer that can score and doesn't cost
always helpful.
£40 million. He puts a question mark next to Piatek at AC Milan.
Yeah, I mean, Steve Bruce, I said this yesterday, in desperate need of a striker. We've seen Joe Linton brought in £40 million, obliterated their club transfer record. Has come in, scored 1 goal back in September, really has struggled. And we saw him in the FA Cup at the weekend as well. As I said yesterday, the away supporters and Newcastle fans singing, "You're not fit to wear the shirt." So,
Ouch.
you know, I think, I think his confidence, without doubt, will have been shot because of that. Steve Bruce is aware of that. He does have a long list. My understanding is it's not that he has selected one striker that he definitely wants. He's got a list that he's trying to go for. I think Newcastle, like most other clubs, are working in the loan market this January. So Giroux was one that I mentioned yesterday. I know that there is interest in potentially bringing him in, but we've mentioned Aston Villa, we've mentioned Italian teams. You know, he's going to have his pick of teams, it looks like, now that he's been told he can probably go.
Go where the weather is, maybe.
Yeah.
He's got the option.
So he's probably not going to go to Newcastle, is it? Yeah.
Well.
So we mentioned Michy Batshuayi, and then of course Christophe Piatek, who you've just said, Dave. I think Piatek probably is on that list as well, but the AC Milan manager Stefano Pioli has told him that he does have a future at AC Milan, that despite the arrival of Zlatan Ibrahimovic. I think everyone assumed that with Ibrahimovic arriving in Milan, that would allow Piatek to go out on loan, but he said, no, you can still use him here. So it feels very much like, even in the early days of this transfer window, it feels very like Newcastle are knocking at doors and not getting an answer. Steve Bruce did say last week at his news conference that he expects to be busy towards the end of the window. He doesn't think it'll move in the first couple of weeks. Not what he wants, because he needs a striker in now. They have massive matches coming up. They have Andy Carroll, who can't play every week because of a succession of niggling injuries. We've got Dwight Gale, who most likely will go, and we'll have Joe Linton, who can't score. So he desperately needs someone in now, but it looks as though he's going to have to be patient. Yeah,
just on Dwight Gale, Danny has tweeted in saying West Brom need a striker in this window to secure promotion. He says, I would love Dwight Gale back. Any chance?
Well, I mean, he did terrifically well in the past. I think for Newcastle's part, they would want to do a permanent deal. I think they'd be listening to offers in the region of £15 million for him. So if West Brom have £15 million to spend, I think Newcastle probably would deal. But at the same time, they want to make sure they've got someone lined up, because they won't want to just leave Joe Linton and Andy Carroll. They want to make sure they've got a third striker there. If I'm honest, I do expect Dwight Gale to probably go this window, but there are only a few clubs in the Championship. You think it would be a Championship team who would take him. There are only a few clubs, very few clubs, who can not only afford the £50 million, but can afford his wages, because he's one of the highest earners at Newcastle.
And I realise we're bombarding you with things here, Keith, but West Ham and Darren Randolph from Middlesbrough. This one looks like it's edging closer.
I thought he was the one in the spotlight. No. What I can tell you is Darren Randolph is in London right now, undergoing his medical with West Ham. A fee of £4 million was agreed last night for his services. He only had a year and a half left on his contract at Middlesbrough. Of course, he's Republic of Ireland #1, still got a lot of goalkeeping left in him. And interestingly, he actually left West Ham to go to Middlesbrough 2.5 years ago for £5 million. So they've managed to recoup £4 million of that, and he's only got a year and a half left. So I think they've had a couple of other goalkeepers. We saw Mayhas at the weekend, and Ainsley Pear's a youngster who's done terrifically well. So I think they feel they've probably got enough. Allow Randolph to go back up and have another crack at the Premier League. So having his medical just now, £4 million agreed, and that should be announced. Darren Randolph to West Ham from Middlesbrough later today.
OK, Keith, thank you very much. I don't want to hear from anybody else. That was just, the Keith Downey part. Mark, thank you very much. First show, I thought it went very well for you.
Oh, I love being back.
JD, Alice, thank you very much. Remember, thank you very much for getting in touch as well, because we always appreciate your feedback at Sky Sports News, #TransferTalk as well. The podcast is available as well on iTunes, Spreaker and the Sky Sports website. Good Morning Transfers returns tomorrow at 9 a.m. Don't worry, Tom White is back. He's had a lie-in. Transfer Talk returns in a couple of hours. That's from midday. And Dharmesh Sheth and Kaveh Solakol return, phones in hand, with the transfer show. That starts at 7 p.m. tonight. Next up here on Sky Sports News, it's Football Centre. Jermaine Beckford is here. They will look ahead to this evening's Manchester derby. It's the EFL Cup semi-final.